A big thank you to all my patrons who support the Engineered Mind podcast. Hi and welcome to the Engineered Mind podcast. In this podcast, we cover topics such as engineering, artificial intelligence, neuroscience, and other interesting topics to educate, inspire, and engineer people's minds all around the world. I'm your host Yusuf, and for this episode of the podcast, I'm very happy to welcome Anish Mohammed to my show. Anish is a multi-disciplinarian who has worked as medical doctor, bioinformatician, strategy consultant, and cryptographer. He has spent half his career researching cryptographic algorithms and protocols at 3 different research groups. He is an early advisor to Ripple, co-founder of Ethicsnet, and head of research at the Information Science Institute at SRH University of Applied Sciences. In this really interesting podcast, Anish and I talked about how money works, what cryptocurrencies are and how the underlying blockchain technology works, advantages and disadvantages of cryptos, where to invest your first $100 into, where and how to save your cryptos, and some resources that Anish recommends on finance, cryptos, and learning more about mental models. For updates on upcoming podcasts, projects, and videos, make sure to follow me on Twitter as well as on Instagram. To join my weekly newsletter, engineeredmind.sh, where I share exclusive content, visit yusuf.substack.com. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's my podcast with Anish Mohammed. So welcome Anish to my show. It's really a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you to invite me.
Awesome. So finally, after we figured out the internet connection problems on our side, today we want to talk about cryptocurrency and money in general, so people have a rough understanding or like a 101 of blockchain, cryptos, etc. Could you but first explain who is Anish and what does he actually do?
Hi, my name is Anish Mohammed. I've done 20 years of security and cryptography. I have 1 degree in medicine, 2 degrees in mathematics. For the last 7 years plus, I've been working mostly in blockchain, early advisor of Ripple from 2013, one of the early people involved in the large Ethereum team, original review of the orange paper for Ethereum, designed another, in total half a dozen blockchain protocols in blockchains, and more than 20 dApps at this moment in time. This includes a couple of DEXs. Probably that's what I do. I have a small consulting gig called RSQ Labs, where I do a small amount of consulting. I work on a privacy preserving protocol called Pantherprotocl. These are the 2 things I do. I advise a small bunch of other protocols, include Boson Protocol, Ocean Protocol, things of that sort.
Very interesting. So you have a wide variety of interests and knowledge, we can say. To kick things off before we jump straight into crypto can you explain to people what is actually money?
Money is an imaginary thing. It's an imaginary store of value. The thing that typically happens is, if you want to transfer something, if I had a bunch of goats and you had a bunch of cows, if you wanted to swap the thing, in theory, you could have a barter. You have a cow, I give 5 of my goats and you give me a cow, right? But the thing is, you actually need to have both the needs synced up. It has to happen at the same time, at the same location, right? But how do we actually get around this problem? The temporary way to fix this could be like, say, a temporary store of value. Say, imagine X. So you sell your cow for 100X, and then I sell my goats for, I can actually buy or sell a goat using the X. So there is a temporary store of value that kind of allows you to actually intermediate this transaction. So both our needs doesn't necessarily have to happen instantaneously, but it can happen within the duration of the time for which the money is valid. So this is pretty much how money works and what money does.
Mm-hmm. What are the differences between each currencies right now? Because also we have in the crypto area, on the blockchain area, we also have different kind of cryptocurrencies. And what is the difference between, let's say, US dollar and the euro, for example? What makes them different?
So, in general, any currency is actually backed by the issuer. So let me see if I have a US dollar. Yes, I have a US dollar here. So this is US dollar, right? So the thing with the US dollar is it's a bearer instrument, right? So bearer instrument means if you actually have this with you, the issuer of this thing, which is the federal bank or the Federal Reserve, right? The Federal Reserve, says to you, they promise an equivalent of value, in this case, $5 for, if you submit to them. So this is essentially what that means. It's a bearer instrument that's being backed by the issuer. So if the issuer is the Federal Reserve, that's the US dollar. If it's the Bank of England, is actually pound, right? If you actually look at the pound, at the bottom of it will say, this is a pound, and this would actually say, they will actually give you to this bearer of whoever is actually having this piece of paper, equivalent of value of 20 pounds. That's what this means, right? So if euro then is ECB, and ECB is the issuer, ECB offers you the promise that if you hold one of these pieces of paper, they will give you 20 euros worth of value.
Mm-hmm. Is money really backed by, let's say, gold, for example? Because there are some things called the fiat currencies, right? Or the fiat.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, at one point in time, that was the thing. I think 1970s, it actually got delinked. So until then, what happened is, like, you would actually have your gold reserve, and the gold reserve would actually represent the amount of money that you issued. So unfortunately, in the 1970s, there was, if I'm not mistaken, there's a Bretton Woods agreement. The delinking of money from US dollar happened. And since then, it's mostly, if you think of the US dollar, the Federal Reserve will actually issue, treasury bonds. And what a treasury bond is like a very low risk issuance where you actually have the ability to get some coupons for actually holding onto it. So by selling and buying bonds, they're able to, printing more money, buying and selling more bonds, they're able to increase the volume of US dollars in the total market.
Mm-hmm. So now if we think about this virtual money, because some people also fear that we move towards a cash-free society, which has maybe some benefits but also some disadvantages, which we might talk about during the podcast.
Sure.
Could you maybe, for a beginner who doesn't know anything about cryptocurrencies or the blockchain technology, however you want to start with, let's say you want to start with blockchain or cryptocurrency, what is it actually and how can we use it?
Oh, very simple. Remember our conversation, you asked a very important question. You asked a question about money. What does this translate to, right? I told you this is a backer. It's an issuer instrument. It's like a bearer instrument. You actually have a issuer that backing the bearer of this instrument for the value it represents, right? So one of the things that happens with the bearer instrument is, like, I have it in my wallet, and if I have $10, right? If I gave you this, my wallet will have $10 less. Mm-hmm. In a digital world, if I send you this, I will still have the $10 copy of this. So I can do a double spend. So even though I have a 10-pound note, I might be able to send it 10 times. And you can't physically do this. If you do this in a physical world, it's called counterfeiting. You will go to jail, right? Yeah. So this is exactly the problem. The problem is called offline double spend, or a double spend problem. So like you have one note, you try to spend it twice. So if you do it twice in a normal thing, you are called in for counterfeiting, you go to jail, right? So what happens here is, in the cryptocurrency world, you just want to prevent it. So there was a mechanism that was created to prevent this, and this is called blockchain. Essentially, it's like a chain of blocks that actually keep track in history of, keeps track of who has what, okay? So it says Anish has a wallet of 100, and Murad has a wallet of 90, Anish transfers his 10 crypto, whatever, Murad coins, right? 10 Murad coins to Murad. So now Murad has 100 and Anish has 90. That's what blockchain is, and that's what cryptocurrency is.
Mm-hmm. How can you overcome this? What is the underlying principle of overcoming this double spending problem?
So the underlying principle is, like, you have, let's take the case of Bitcoin and let's walk through the consensus mechanism. I kind of explain how this is being solved. Mm-hmm. So this is very much the question of consensus. So what is happening is, when I do an electronic transfer, not everybody actually sees what is happening, right? The thing with paper is, like, even if nobody else sees it, because you have physical access to the paper, you can't actually copy it. It's kind of done. But in the digital world, everybody needs to know that the transfer has happened between the two of us, and nobody knows who is telling the truth and who is telling a lie, right? So it could be that I might say, no, I didn't send Murad 10 Murad coin, and I still have 100, right? Who knows if a one Murad coin is worth $50,000 US, I might very well do that, right? So this is a challenge. So how do we prevent this from happening? So what Bitcoin kind of did was, every time any transaction is being sent, it gets aggregated and put into a big chart, and the big chart gets signed by everybody that's online. That's one way of thinking. And this is the block I was describing. You can think of it like a large flip chart, and all the transaction is happening within a room, and Murad and I are in the same room, and I say to Murad, for a coffee, I'm going to pay you 10 Murad coin, and you somehow give me a coffee, or you give me a book, right? So what happens is, like, everybody in this room who listens to this, actually they write this thing down. And one of the mechanisms that happens to incentivize the people to write this thing down is you give them, at the end of the day, you actually have a small ball, and everybody who does this writing on the wall or the flip chart puts their name into it. And one person randomly picks one up, and the person who gets selected is given 10 Murad coins, right? So this is essentially mining in that sense. So every transaction that goes through gets written onto a block, and everybody signs on it. And the magical signing of everybody means that everybody knows that this is actually what is happening, and you all have a clear idea of who transacted with who. And if there is a challenge, then you can look at all the people that have signed and say, okay, if Anish has more people signed for his transaction than Murad, then Anish's transaction wins. That's kind of loosely how it works.
Mm-hmm. But this was very well explained, Anish. I appreciate it. And we will talk about this kind of the majority and minority of people who actually do mining and at a later point. This is why I actually ask what's the difference between money, the real money, and cryptocurrency, which is that there is a third party involved in the real world, right? Usually it's like the financial institutions, which is not the case in, let's say, Bitcoin, if we do Bitcoin transactions.
The definition of third party is a question, right? If you think about the protocol as a protocol, and protocol needs nothing, then there is no third party.
Yes.
If you actually require, protocol doesn't exist in thin air. The protocol requires miners, protocol requires exchanges, protocol requires developers, protocol requires maintainers. So there are a lot of parties in this ecosystem. So in many ways, this arbitrary thinking that the cryptocurrencies don't require anybody else is wishful thinking. But yes, the kind of control that people have over cryptocurrencies is kind of limited. So let's take the example of Mr. Elon, doing some magic. You can fill in the blanks for the choice of words you want, right? So that's exactly what I'm kind of saying. Like, the protocol has been effed by Mr. Elon, right? Essentially, what he did was he really manipulated Bitcoin, right? Easily, very easily. So that actually shows that cryptocurrencies have a Achilles heel, and some people who are absolutely crazy will do crazy things, and it just happens that everybody is held hostage to that mechanism there, right? And nobody has a real control. But you need to recognize Elon can't do that to the US dollar, right?
Yes.
For obvious reasons, right? This is the thing. So when you have parties who are responsible to keep track of things, they maintain the stability of the instrument. When there is nobody there, manipulators like Elon can actually play the game. So it causes... So to me, the thing is, like, if he managed to increase the value of Bitcoin by like 10%, and it goes to the top, and he just cashes it out and comes back down, and then does it on a continuous basis.
Yes.
It costs him one tweet, and he will probably be making a few billion by tweet. It could be the most expensive tweets in the history of Twitter.
Yes. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Do you think because of this volatility, because of this fluctuation of the cryptocurrencies, that it will never have a future, quote unquote?
I know you can actually have stable coins, and if you really look at the value of crypto in that sense, locked in stable currencies, is pretty huge. So the whole concept of DeFi is pretty much tied to the stability, right? So the problem essentially is that Mr. Elon wakes up. And while we are trying to buy coffee, does whatever he was doing, or smokes whatever he normally does, and then suddenly decides to put a tweet out, right? So by the time I order the coffee, and the time that the guy makes the coffee, Mr. Elon, after smoking pot, has actually sent a tweet out, and the tweet hits the Twitter up, right? So there you go. So you are unable to buy your coffee. You need to pay so much more, right? This is the volatility. So you actually have to stabilize this. Typically, there are three ways to do this. One is to tether this to gold. Like, imagine you have a cryptocurrency backed by gold. You can do that, right? Two is you have a cryptocurrency backed by other cryptocurrencies. But it's kind of not the smartest thing to do because it's a correlator, does it? What I mean by that, if you notice how cryptocurrencies move, when you actually see a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, when Bitcoin goes up, normally Ethereum goes up, even Dogecoin goes up, right? Thanks to Mr. Elon, right? So that's what happens. So if you have a basket of them, you can get stability, but it's not the best, right? Then you could think of something else. So say, for example, you can have algorithmic stabilization. What you do is you buy and sell, and then you can actually stabilize. So the first is like the first version. I don't know how many coins are there that have stable backed normal assets. You can have commodities there, gold, other things. Two is like crypto backed ones. DAI is an example. A third is like algorithmic one. Basis is an example of an algorithmic one. So so this is the three classes of stable coins, and you can use this to actually get a bit of stability. Then you can go and do things. So you don't actually have this challenge of you go look at something and come back, the price of that goes 3 times up. That's not there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, jumping for a quick moment back to the blockchain. How does it actually work with the blockchain? How much information can the blockchain store? And where do you see problems? Because miners actually do that, right? They can take, it's like a bus stop, so to speak. So you're waiting at the bus stop, and depending on how much you actually spend for the transfer or going into this bus, namely the blockchain, would you like to explain something here?
Yeah, I would describe it slightly differently.
Okay.
So I would describe this as like you are in a very, very busy city. So if it's in India, I would consider that as, Bangalore, right? The traffic is so jam-packed, and you're getting an Uber, right? So literally, Uber is going to, literally do the search pricing, right? This is literally what is happening in Ethereum, right? So you want to go from point A to point B, and you wanted to actually, pay a normal money. But unfortunately, there's a surge, so the price has gone shot up. So your price is no longer the price. So you might not be able to get an Uber. That's pretty much what is happening here. So there's nothing that's different from what we see in Uber making money out of everybody else, where Ethereum is doing the same by adding transactions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask actually. But if it's now the bus stop analogy or the one from Uber, I think it comes out to the same point, I guess. People also have a lot of concerns about the future of Bitcoin regarding the hash rate and also the huge amount of energy that are spent on doing mining, for example. How do you see the future there? Of will the Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency drop because of the huge amount of transactions being?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, okay, this is what one needs to understand, right? So one of the things that everybody should recognize is Elon is actually doing a disservice to the world, right? If you believe, Elon is very, very conscious of climate, he would never tweet and push the price of Bitcoin. Why? Because the security margin of Bitcoin is very much a function of the total amount of hash power. And what that translates to is the total amount of electrical energy that you need to spend.
This is right.
So assuming, average spend of energy to be X, and if the value of Bitcoin goes up, more miners come in, more energy gets spent for a single block consensus. So literally speaking, people like Elon who say, oh, I want to save Earth, shouldn't do things like what he's doing, right? And I haven't seen anybody challenging people like him having this hypocritical statements. Right?
Yeah, I only saw one tweet where it stated something like somebody calculated that transactions would take 700 kilowatt hours or so, which is insane. So it doesn't actually make sense. Like he's for a clean future, but pushing Bitcoin is kind of oxymoron in some sense.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said. Right?
Yes.
That's exactly what I said.
Yeah, so that's absolutely correct. When it comes to the anonymity of cryptocurrencies, and we will talk about the two you are part of in the future, there are some things called, where, let's say you have Coinbase, for example, where you trade your coins, and there's something called the KYC, so know your customer process. How can you overcome? Is it really anonymous?
No. So let me try explain the challenges of the world in that sense. Okay. So the challenges of the world is like every bank in the world would like to, or every country, this goes back to the question of who issues money, right? So if you think about the pound, this is the Bank of England that issues this, and they actually have an interest in making sure that they can get their taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have the ability to track every pence that's being spent. But in the digital world, they have the ability to track everything that's happening. So they want to make sure they know who has what, right? So they are keen on understanding, who has how much of money and where they spend it and how they spend it, right?
Yeah.
So they would like to do this thing called know your customer and anti-money laundering. Know your customer is getting the proof that the person who he or she is has like some identity, has something to which they can bind them to. Anti-money laundering is like the various authorities actually publish. This is again a bit funny. Say for example, some nation states actually, accuse other people of being terrorists. And once they call you a terrorist, you can't actually get a bank account, right? Pretty much, that's what happens. So this is very much kind of an enforcement by a set of politically powerful entities on entities who don't have the power, right? So if you're a nation, like certain nations in the Middle East, and you have some views about that people who control the nation, and you say this publicly, they will just call you a terrorist, and they publish, as a government, you can publish that you are a terrorist. And the moment that happens, you will no longer be able to actually have an account. Mm-hmm. So this is part of the problem that you have. This is a KYC problem. If you go to Binance or any other well-known US-based exchanges, they will actually ask you for KYC AML. And once you do the KYC AML, what you will end up resulting in is like if you are on that list, you will never get an account. So you should think of an exchange as the bridge between the crypto world and the real world, as in like the fiat world. You can sell your crypto, and then you can get on the other side, you can get fiat.
Mm-hmm. Got it, yeah. What is, like, there are these institutions doing deep forensics. For example, you might have heard of Elliptic or Chainalytics, right? And even the US government is also working with them to actually see and try to track who's actually doing a transaction in the crypto world. How do you see the future? Like when people are skeptical and they want to go into Bitcoin, Ethereum, or any other coin, can this be overcome? Like this problem of anonymity?
So yes and no. So let me explain and give you some context. So I kind of mentioned in my introduction that I work on a protocol called the Pantherprotocl. So the part of the reason why we ended up designing the protocol is our concern about privacy and the way things are going. So me and my co-founder, we spent almost a year trying to figure out ways to get this done. So, you can actually have privacy, and you can also have the ability to, if required, if you really think you want to prove to somebody that you want to do KYC AML, it is possible for you to prove this using zero-knowledge proofs. So zero-knowledge proof is a class of mathematical problems that allows you to prove a claim that you make is true without revealing how you do it. Say, for example, I take the case of this room. This room has one door, and then if I were to make a claim that I have the ability to escape from this room, me, Anish, is the prover, and Murad is the verifier. So, me and Murad would go to outside this room. We would stand outside this room. I will go inside the room. Murad would close the door behind me. And after a few minutes' time, Murad would see me outside the room, but I haven't come through the door. So Murad knows for a fact that I have the ability to escape from this room without using the door. But Murad doesn't know how I do it. So this is called a zero-knowledge proof, right? So you can use this kind of techniques to actually provide privacy. So you can do some KYC AML to prove that you are legitimate, but not reveal who you are and what you are, right? And this is kind of where we should be going, where in an ideal world, we should at least have the same kind of privacy you have with a piece of paper, which is cash, right? Mm-hmm. This actually gives you privacy because when you give your currency, nobody actually reads the number over here at the bottom and puts it anywhere and sends it to the Central Bank of England immediately, right? So this is essentially what is happening in crypto. So whenever somebody does a transaction, their wallet address is known and it's actually being sent out to everybody, and then everything is known to everybody else. So this is the kind of thing that's happening.
So Pantherprotocl is mainly working on the privacy. Is that correct, or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, this is what we were trying to do. So in the DeFi world, people want to do DeFi transactions, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to go to a DEX like Uniswap, swap your one currency for another. You want to go to Compound, buy or Curve, and you want to buy or sell some stable currencies. All of this right now, actually, it happens with no privacy. So imagine you are it's for both the small person and the big person. Mm-hmm. The small person is like a people like you and me who really care about privacy, and the larger players in this ecosystem. The larger players in this ecosystem, they have a challenge. So imagine, Murad, you run a hedge fund. You have 100 mil, right? And you do big transactions. So I could go onto the graph and deploy a subgraph onto your smart contract and track every transaction you do. So even though you create a new strategy and you deploy a strategy, the moment you deploy the strategy, I will have a copy transaction. So the moment my graph actually, when your smart contract triggers it, the smart contract informs my graph, and my graph would actually then, my subgraph would actually invoke another smart contract to copy your transaction, right? So what this essentially means that your ability to actually execute this strategy would be decreased significantly, because the depth of the market will be decreased significantly, because I am copying your transaction. And I'm also taking your intellectual property out, because it's the effort that you put in to find out a new strategy and you're losing it, right? And there is also the challenge in a sense, like I could actually do a sandwich attack, right? It's a minor extractable value kind of attack, which is like a front-running attack. So I figure out what you're trying to do, and I see that you have your smart contract that actually does an arbitrage between two exchanges or two different protocols. I go to the protocol that you're going to go next and do the thing in the opposite direction, or do something which actually gets you stuck in a very tight bounded value. So your strategy completely not work. So there are this kind of problems that you could have. A, that is of privacy. Two, that is of actually being able to run your own strategies efficiently, and B, being front run on being attacked with sandwich attacks.
Mm-hmm. Got it. It's super interesting. And I will put the link of Pantherprotocl also down in the description, Anish.
Sure.
Very interesting. When people have absolutely no idea, of course, I'm not an expert, and you probably also wouldn't advise someone to invest in something which they don't understand, right? So let's say someone would like to start investing. Would you say they should go for crypto, or is it like a diversification of their portfolio?
Yeah, I would really recommend diversification of the portfolio. So, you could probably see my shelf. So the top row over there, a large chunk of it is finance. You probably see finance books over there. Mm-hmm. Finance and game theory and cryptography and all those things. So that's that's finance and economics. That's mm-hmm. game theory in the middle. That's that is financial engineering, literally. So, what I would say to you is you should understand what you're doing reasonably well. Even though, I have spent a lot of time reading Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, and I'm great fans of them. And I'm also a great fan of Ray Dalio. And I've spent a reasonable amount of time understanding both the macroeconomic and the microeconomic trends in the ecosystem. What I would say to you is you need to understand your risk. So you have a risk, risk appetite, right? Are you willing to give away all the money you have if things go in the wrong direction, right? And that's kind of what really drives whether you want to enter crypto or not. Crypto is very volatile. The volatility is 40%. It could very much depend on whether Elon smokes pot or not, right? I'm just kidding. I'm not suggesting he smokes pot, but we have ample evidence stating that could be probably the case. But you don't know. I'm not suggesting that, right? Mm-hmm. So it very much whims and fantasies of lots of people. That's what I mean. It could be Elon, it could be somebody else, it could be anybody who's an influencer. Who knows, tomorrow Kane West might turn up and say something, and that might change the same thing. So, whether him drinking water versus coffee might be the implication. So that's the volatility you have. You have a 40% volatility. That's incredibly high compared to most things that are there. So your question is how much money can you afford to invest? How much of volatility are you willing to tolerate? And how patient are you as an investor, right? So that kind of informs how you are planning to do. So if you were a normal average person, depending, say, 20s or 30s, and you have a reasonable amount of, income that you can, how could I say, a disposable income that you can save, I would say, between 5 to 10% of your income, if you were to look at a portfolio of crypto, it might be a very good investment. So, typical, as I said, the 40% volatility means you can have a 40% gain and you can have a 40% loss. So, depending upon how keen you are, you could actually get into crypto. Given that's like 5 to 10%, it is a pretty good investment. You will definitely do okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think also what a lot of people do not really understand, and I include myself here for sure, what are the differences between all these cryptos? We have Bitcoin, we have Ripple, we have Ethereum, and so on. What do you see the differences between them? Is it only like how they are programmed?
Okay, each of them is a protocol. So, if you think about Bitcoin is very much for just transferring money across, as in value across. That's what it does. Ethereum is a universal computer in one sense of speaking. It has more ability to do more things. So that's why we have the whole decentralized finance on top, right? If you look at, Ripple again is like a transfer of value thing. If you look at, say, Cardano is like a universal computer in one sense of speaking. That's true of Polkadot, that's true of Cosmos. Each of them, you could think of this as like, how could I describe cars, right? Like, every car claims it's different. And some cars are supercars. A normal car is different from a supercar. You wouldn't buy a supercar to go to your local supermarket to buy whatever food you want to buy. Because the supercar doesn't have that space in the boot to put all the food in, right? Mm-hmm. And like you won't even be getting past the second gear before you get to your supermarket, right? So this is how it is. Like each of the protocols have a different characteristic. So you might have a car for a track day. If you're rich enough, you can afford to do that. And in a crypto world, you're rich enough to afford different protocols, right? You can actually use different protocols of different things. You can have a car that actually drives normally with a sedan or a coupe with like 4 doors. You can put people in and go places, or you can go on your track car to a track day. You can have a supercar, hypercar. What the hell you want to choose? That's how I describe protocols as.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. It was very well explained. What do you advise people when it comes to the security issue again? How should I save my Bitcoin? Where should I save them?
Okay, I shall hand wave some bits. Okay, so this is an example of a hardware wallet. You can see it this way.
Ledger Nano.
It's a Ledger Nano. There are a few other Ledger ones as well. Ledger X is a latest version. So you get one of these things and you put your crypto in there. I would recommend using hardware wallets rather than anything else. Ledger comes with a Ledger Live. Mm-hmm. Even MetaMask has the ability to use Ledger. So you can actually have, it's a pain. So you need to log in and be logged in to actually do the transaction. But, it actually prevents any malware from taking away any of your stuff.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Are there any disadvantages of crypto which we didn't mention so far? Or maybe also opportunities where you see them going into the future, maybe, Anish?
Okay. So it depends on how we think about advantage and disadvantage, right? The advantage is like you can actually carry a whole bunch of money. I could probably have a wallet like this. Inside it is tiny. It's like a small USB stick, right? And what could happen is that could be like $1 billion I'm carrying around, right? So that's one thing. And, like you could go to any country and you can actually convert that into whatever you want. You become transnational. Nobody has the ability to control you from having money and moving money around. So that's one advantage. The other side of it is like, you can think of the people that actually, use this kind of flexibility. So mostly, at least to a degree, there are people who actually have criminal activities. So that's the problem there. And again, there's this question of adoption, right? If you look at the total number of people in the world, there are like 8 billion people. I don't think, more than 100 million people have access to crypto at this moment in time.
Should they invest into Bitcoin? If they would ask, because I got the question before our interview on Instagram, like, do you have questions for Anish? Like, should I invest into Dogecoin or Bitcoin?
No. Okay, so the comment I would say is like, remember, I said three things to you, right? So the 3 things I said to you was, number 1, how much money do you have to dispose, right? How much can you manage to use? How patient you are, right? And, the kind of volatility that actually happens in the market, right? So if you have, say, a reasonably large amount of money, and you are willing to take the kind of volatility that Bitcoin is willing to offer you, you can go for it. And if you're going to go long, it is very likely you'll have an upside, right? So that's how I'd say about it. Like, I mean, ideally speaking, if you're really good and you know what you're doing, if you go and invest in new upcoming protocols, they are the ones that really beat BTC, right? So if you look at FTX, they had this thing called, one of the protocols that they produced, it was like 64,000% return on investment, right? So you can't ever get that in BTC at this moment in time, right? Mm-hmm. It's too late for you to get that. So BTC, you will get a reasonable increase. Ethereum and BTC would give you a reasonable amount of increase. But you need to understand where you are and what you're playing.
Mm-hmm. So if someone has, let's say, $100, they should rather spend it on ETFs, maybe, than rather than Bitcoin.
It very much depends. It's like, if they really want to get a bit of exposure to crypto, they should buy, there are ETFs that actually are BTC backed, and there are also futures that are there. You can buy those, right? It very much depends on your level of sophistication and the level of patience and the level of effort you're willing to put in.
Yeah.
If you're just willing to just do, you don't want to be exposed to any of those things, you can go to like Galaxy or something like that. They have an index in that sense, and you can buy Galaxy's thing, right? You get exposure to crypto, but that's different. If you really want to go buy crypto and hold it yourself, that's a different game. So all of this has different levels of overheads. So it's like how much effort you want to put in, what is your, level of patience, how much effort you want to put in going forward, how patient are you, when do you think you're going to get out of the BTC? All those things really factor in. If you just don't want to bother about all those things, like the Galaxies of the world and other people will offer you various things, instruments that allows you exposure to this.
Mm-hmm. How do you see the regulations with the government going on in the future? Do you think they will, we see it in India, right? Trying to banning cryptos?
So China had done that, India is doing it. One needs to see it in one way. Like if a country is I would say fastest, maybe controlling, or maybe, where the government there want to have higher control on the people that are there, they will try to ban crypto. Because so look at Venezuela, right? Venezuela, again, you probably will have real difficulty in actually having BTC, right? Or crypto in that sense. Because the government has very little access to foreign currency, and they will really like to have access to those, right? In other parts of the world, it could be different motivation. It could be that the government there doesn't want people to have access to international currencies, okay, or other reasons. So it very much it's a political question to look at. I mean, in all honesty, they can't do anything to you. Your ability to get hold of crypto is not prevented by any of these guys. It only happens that if you try to do trade in crypto in an exchange that's listed in India, you'll have difficulty. If you mine, if you buy, sell, you use a DEX, it never actually hits any of. So the real thing one needs to understand is, I kind of described it before. The exchanges are the people who do the bridging between the crypto world and the real world. And what is essentially happening is the people that are able to enforce anything only happens at the edges. You can't go into crypto and enforce it, right? So that's not going to happen. So whatever they might think about it, they can't come and get hold of you because you have a wallet. I mean, assuming, this is one of the other things I could probably say what Panther might have. Like, imagine you were somebody who is in a country like this and you wanted to actually have some crypto. Protocols like Panther will completely allow you to go do what you want. I mean, it doesn't really require that kind of sophistication. What I mean by that is, like, you don't need to hide anything. But it'll be useful. You could have a peace of mind that, you could be completely safe, that, the people won't be able to track you down for the transactions you do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I appreciate that you all sent me the link to Pantherprotocl, and as I mentioned, I will put it down in the description.
Sure.
I'll have to check it out this evening, so read every page that you have to familiarize myself with Pantherprotocl. Any last words from your side, Anish? Maybe any advice you could give?
Yeah, I mean, people? The thing I would say to anybody is, like, if you really want to understand blockchain cryptocurrencies, I would recommend, a couple of things. A bit about cryptography, a bit, okay? Secondly, try understand a bit about game theory, and try understand a bit about international finance. If you don't understand the three pieces, what is going to most likely happen is like people will talk nonsense to you, right? And you will have no ability to make what is real and what is not real, right? So I have made it my kind of a quest to make sure that people get more insights to reality. And I normally give a lot of talks. In fact, in my RSQ Labs resources, we actually created a series of lectures describing DeFi. So it's called Decoding DeFi, and you can watch those videos. There are a lot of people like me who really care about people actually knowing what the hell they're doing. Find them, follow them, improve your knowledge. Otherwise, what will happen is you will go outside your circle of competence, right? If you don't recognize your circle of competence and you step outside it, the risk that you take is very high. Mm-hmm. And especially in fields like this, where there's a massive volatility, I would suggest that might not be a very wise move to make.
Mm-hmm. Any recommendations in terms of books or internet resources when it comes to game theory or finance in general?
Oh, okay. Game theory, the book I would recommend, okay, I will do this. Okay, I will give you books straight out. So this is one book I would recommend, The Art of Strategy, Dikshit. And if you get a bit more geeky, I would recommend this one.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Games of Strategy.
Yeah, and then for finance, the books are, all of them are like pretty standard textbooks.
Maybe we should mention the names, Anish, of the two books you just showed us, because if people only listen to it. One was, can you show us the books again?
Yeah.
The Art of Strategy by Dixit and Nailbuff, and the other one?
It's again by, Dikshit, Avinash Dikshit. And
Games of Strategy, Dixit and Skeeth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay, and finance, there are a whole bunch of books. It's pretty hard to recommend one. I mean, I have a pile of them. I don't know which one to recommend.
Would you recommend The Intelligent Investor, though?
It's a good place to start. I have it somewhere here. I do have Intelligent Investor here. The thing is, like, if you are interested, what's the guy's name? The Black Book, Charlie Munger's thing. So books by Charlie Munger are a pretty good read. I would really recommend reading them. Mm-hmm. And I would also recommend books on mental models, if you can get all of them. That's Shane Parrish has a couple of them. And
with the red cover? Was it with the red cover?
Red cover, yes.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, okay. So it will help you understand sort of it. So essentially, if you want to get into finance, I can probably give you a list of books, because like a massive book list that you can read. And I happen to teach a course, a grad level course for AI for finance. So my thinking would be more from the side of applying machine learning and understanding strategies and doing things of that sort. Whereas you can decide what you are interested in and you can go in. And there are lots of people who have listed lots of very interesting books that you can read. And if you have questions, maybe you can reach out to Murad or you can reach out to me, and I'll try answer them as best as I can.
Yeah. Do you have a list of books on your personal website, which people can check out?
I'm afraid the list of books that are there, one is on the course that's being listed in Harborspace that gives the crypto ones. It doesn't have a finance one. I can probably list a bunch of finance books on my RSQ Labs very soon. I'll do that in the next couple of weeks or so.
If people are have an affinity for books, do you have one for Bitcoins? Is it like the Bitcoin Standard?
No, I would not recommend Bitcoin Standard. I have Bitcoin Standard. I have actually met...
Don't you like it?
It is interesting, but it's not for somebody to understand Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I think a bunch of assumptions that are being made on this are pretty strong. So let me walk you through why I think it's kind of a bit questionable. So imagine you have a world where you are a miner. Okay. So in the world in the past, you could one of these things as a D3. Okay. So if you were to buy a whole of these things and you set up a bunch of infrastructure, the money you need to get, you can get it from the normal traditional money market, right? Effectively, that really broke the model, right? You went to the traditional money market, you got the money, you have a whole ASIC. So it's almost like a European call option, right? So to me, assumptions in here are not that great.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a good friend of mine from Stanford, Shunya Noda, who actually wrote a paper on describing use of ASICs. And there's also another paper he wrote on difficulty adjustment algorithm. So, when you read, again, this is very much a question of how deeply you are into all these things, right? And I can also give you a lot of instances why some of the assumptions that have been taken are interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a thing in the right direction, but it very much depends on who you are and what you want to do, right? If you are interested in just understanding Bitcoin, the one by Antonio, whatever his name is, how do you pronounce his name? I have his Ethereum book in front of me, but I don't have his Andreas Antonopoulos Mastering Bitcoin. If you can get hold of it, it'll give you a pretty good idea of Bitcoin. He also has an Ethereum one, and that's an Ethereum one.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to, you should read this one. But, my take on it is like all of this, it depends on what you really want to understand, what you want to go after. Are you interested in monetary policies? I'm assuming most of the people who go get into crypto have very little interest in monetary policy and monetary systems. So, the value you will get by reading a Bitcoin, Bitcoin standard will be very different, right? I'm not sure you'll gain much by reading Bitcoin standard, unless you plan to become a central banker in some sense. Even then, that's a very different story. I'll give you a very different reading list, because I've had clients who are entities, nation states, that were looking at this, and my reading list for them is different.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Anish.
You're welcome.
I also think it depends, because we live in a world where everything is fast living, and especially if you're on Twitter, you're getting bombarded by information. I think if you want to you cannot understand everything, I would say. So if you want to get started with Bitcoin, I think the resources you gave us are quite comfortable and easy to digest, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, it'll get you started, definitely. My expectation is the following, right? I will put my hand up and say, I wouldn't claim that I understand 100% of cryptocurrencies, right? I mean, there are a lot I don't really, even bother to look at. Because to me, it's like the areas which I have worked on, I look at the improvements in the space. So I worked on Ethereum, I worked on a whole bunch of other protocols, I worked on DEXs, I worked on data marketplaces. So for me, I keep track of those things. I work a lot on security of smart contracts. So all those things that is of interest to me, I work on zero knowledge proofs. I look on all these things. But beyond that, if anything happens, I look at it, I'm not going to go searching for it, right? So you can pretty much define, like, how much time do you have in a week to spend on this? If you have 10 hours, you might do it differently. If you have 100 hours, you do it differently. If you have 160 hours, essentially a week is 169 68 hours, right? Mm-hmm. So you probably are not going to have much, right? So I'm just kidding when I say this. Like, it is unlikely to actually, given the pace at which crypto space is booming, it is unlikely you'll be able to understand it, read everything. And then always this challenge, the signal to noise ratio, right? As I was describing, the people who normally you consider as people who have high signal to noise ratio, even like Elon, is actually doing funny things in crypto. So you can imagine the average person, how bullshitty they are, right? So if you're getting on Twitter, I mean, pretty much I would say your odds of finding somebody who knows what they're talking about is incredibly small. Pretty much all the people, I mean, think of it this way, like, it's like, you walk into a street, you randomly walk into a street, imagine you have a heart attack. Your chance that the person that stood right in front of you is a cardiologist. What's the odds that's the case, right? It's very tiny, right? Something similar. The odds, there are a lot more cardiologists in the world than people who really understand, blockchain protocols, right? I would absolutely say the total number of people in the world who have actually built a layer 1 protocol will be in a couple of hundreds rather than in thousands. There are hundreds of thousands of cardiologists in the world, right? I can do a Fermi's, kind of estimate in that sense. I know how many classmates I had from my med school. As I said, I have a degree in medicine. I went to med school. My classmates became cardiologists. I know out of a class of 200, how many became cardiologists, right? I can extrapolate that globally and get a number. And the number is at best, it's like, tens of thousands less than hundreds of thousands, right? So, your odds are kind of there. Like, what are your odds that you walk into the street and you run into something like that? That's kind of what I'm saying. Right? Like, so you understand where your odds are. So understand that a lot of the people on Twitter, they are doing this not because they want to help the community. They want to actually, they have hidden agendas and motives. Once you understand what those are, then you apply the filter, then you will understand, who to follow, what to follow.
Yeah, how do you personally tackle this, Anish? I'm quite interested in that because you have such a broad range of interests and knowledge. Let's say someone comes to you and says, hey, Anish proclaimed he's like some kind of Bitcoin guru, whatever, but he basically knows nothing. But you try to come up with arguments from your side to actually get into an argument with a guy saying you're not an expert. How do you handle this?
Oh, it's very simple. Like I say to them, look, I don't host a single page on me. Why don't you go to Google, put my name, and whatever topic that you think I have done, and you can look at what I've done, right? So it's simple. In a way, you can think of Google as being a blockchain, and in fact, you can think of it like a Wayback Machine as literally having a logical timestamp. Right? It's actually a timestamp. So you just say to them, look, why don't you go do this? Okay, you can actually look at my LinkedIn profile. You can actually see what the CTO of Ripple has said about it, right? Go find the orange paper or find the front page and see if you can find my name on the front page. Okay, these are the list of projects and protocols that are my name as advisors. And at different points in time, I've given talks about all these things. We'll go through those talks and figure out all these things. So the Swarm, in Swarm Summit in 2018, you can find my talk there, me talking to everybody, right? So there's like lot and lot of evidence. So essentially, it's a Bayesian process. I say, imagine I'm lying. You have a half a chance I'm a liar, okay? Now, let me improve your chances by providing you with a proof for statement one. I say to you, okay, I worked on Ripple, and I can actually provide you the proof that I had access to, Ripple's this and this and this. In addition to this, you can publicly verify a bunch of things, right? That's one. Then I go Ethereum, then you see that, and then that's that. The probability that I am lying will decrease significantly every time you verify each of them, right? And once you start looking at all the talks I've given and all the places where I've taught, and you can see some of my courses that I taught online, you should have a fairly good idea. If MIT invites me to give bullshit talks, then I don't think MIT is doing a good job. If Carnegie Mellon allows me to come in and do bullshit job, Carnegie Mellon is not doing. So I definitely consider MIT and Carnegie Mellon as pretty good. So is Imperial, so is KCL, so is UCL. This is like a long process. Like I've done enough of it. So let's think about token engineering. The first token engineering talk in London, the token engineering meetup was given by me. First talk about zero knowledge proof and the Ethereum meetup group was given by me, right? Mm-hmm. So this is like you just go to Google and put the topic in, and then you go through it and you recognize. I put in a lot of effort trying to explain to people what things are. So if I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, the chances that I will be able to explain to people is incredibly small. It's like a very hard thing to do if you don't know what you're talking about, right? So it is very unlikely that I can exist as the person who did all those things and know nothing about any of the things I say, right? And in addition to this, I actually published a bunch of papers on cryptography, right? It's on Microsoft Research homepage. And I don't think Microsoft Research is an idiotic company, right? Nor are the institutes where I worked at. They've had the top cryptographers in the world. In Indian Statistical Institute in Calcutta, it had Adi Shamir just before me, right? I don't think a lot of the research labs where I worked get all the random people from the street and allow them to work there, right? So these are all historical data points, right? You can go and validate it yourself. And then if you still think, it's not true, then what can I say to you? I say, don't use any of the protocol I worked on. Good luck to you.
Yeah, that's good. Anish 1, hater 0. Anish, why are you on Earth? What's your purpose on Earth? What is your goal in, let's say, 10, 15 years? What are you working on?
So as I said, I consider, at a meta level, I think of myself an effective algorithm. It's like if I have two choices, A versus B, I would like to do the decision where there's positive impact on humanity. So I am looking at problems which I think I can solve and have positive impact on humanity. So this includes ethics of AI. I kind of mentioned it to you in a previous conversation that I have interest in ethics and ethics of AI. So that's one area I'm interested in. I'm interested in privacy preserving machine learning. I'm also interested in privacy in a meta aspect because the whole world could be divided into two. a set of the world where privacy is not, never really considered. Example, social ranking system in China and things of that sort, where privacy is completely being, ignored and people are being constrained significantly. Other parts of the world with different degrees of gray, where you have different degrees of, privacy preserving things. So I have interest in privacy and trying to provide the people of the world with privacy. This would be what I would love to do.
Perfect. Love it. Do you consider yourself a good learner? Or learning fast?
I don't know. I would consider myself either a good learner or a fast learner. Typically speaking, I go into an area and try to create as much value as I can. So, in a way, I don't have to learn myself. I create stuff, so other people have to learn. I don't have to. That's a lazy way of doing things. So I think, examples are like the cloud. So I got involved in the cloud in 2007. In fact, I met Andrew Jassy in 2007 in London. So I wrote the Cloud Bias Decision Guide version 2.13 out of the 10 sections. A lot of those things. So essentially, when you cook stuff up, other people have to follow you. So talking engineering as the example, right? Yeah. So you cook things up that you don't have to learn, but other people have to learn. But yes, you have to learn a lot. You can see in my books here, and I spend a lot of time reading and learning, and I have to understand a lot of things. I don't think I'm that fast a learner. I'm pretty fast, but I would love to be a lot more faster.
What advice would you give people? I would assume because you have so many interests that, let's say, if you learn about AI and ethics and mathematics, like the interconnection between those fields, they're so close together.
Yeah.
That one field.
I absolutely agree. Like, what effectively happens is, like, once you have enough of, and this is why I kind of mentioned the mental model books to everybody as well, right? Like, once you actually build your mental model and your tool set, so if you do, linear algebra, so over there you would see a bunch of books, and those are linear algebra books, right? If you know linear algebra, then the machine learning here becomes very easy, right? So, you can actually apply those to this. And then there's Bayesian somewhere over there. It's a bunch of books on Bayesian, right? So there's statistics. So this is like, a whole bunch of things, merge. So once you know something, you look at this problem and you go, oh, how would I do this, right? And then go, oh, this is how I would do it. And then you look at how other people have solved. To a large degree, a lot of the ways that people solve is similar. And then how could I say, retrofit your thinking model. So it's like, so if you were to say something to me, I go, that doesn't look like, okay, imagine you said to me, you know what, you're going to create a new electric car, right? I go and you say, my energy density is 25 times higher than Tesla's, right? I go, that'll be very interesting. Can you tell me, what's your battery technology, right? So this is the kind of thing, like, you have like a basic understanding of things. So you have understanding of electronics, you have understanding of physics, you have understanding of mathematics, and chemistry and things like that. Once you get to a level where you have like a pretty high level of understanding, as in, like, when I say high, it's like you understand the topmost ideas, and to a good degree, it's like a T kind of personality,
yes.
like that. So essentially, you have a very good idea of a lot of topics. You have a pretty good idea on lots of things to a pretty deep level. Then you are able to then pick something up and validate it, and it becomes easier and easier. And then the width of the T increases, right? So over time, the width of the T. So when you start out, you will have a very sharp T, right? Like that on a T. And what happens is the T, extends that way, and the width of the thing increases this way. So, if you are super fast and super good, it is almost, you can actually transform the T into a rectangle. I don't think it will be that easy to do, but, in an ideal world, somebody might turn that into a rectangle. If that becomes a rectangle, there will be a true polymath.
Yeah, this is crazy. I appreciate your time, Anish. It was really nice talking to you. And hopefully, if we have another talk, maybe we can talk about finance, investment, or anything else.
Sure.
I mean, you have a lot of topics to offer, right?
Oh, yeah. I do have expertise in a lot of topics, yes.
Yeah, maybe we can also talk about cryptography. Is an interesting one.
Sure. Absolutely. We can talk about zero-knowledge proofs. We can talk about privacy. We can talk about privacy preserving machine learning. We can talk about machine learning. We can talk about ethics of AI. You can talk about existential risk of AI. You can pick one and I can talk about it.
Okay, then let's meet in a few weeks again, Anish. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you so much and take care.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye.